Coaching Carousel Part 2 here on the Audible, which includes the Miami Dolphins finally making a decision. It wasn't Vance Joseph. It was Mike McDaniel. And how long have we been talking about Mike McDaniel as a potential head coach in the NFL, Bloom?
Yeah, for a few years. Wow, Cease. This is a show we do every year, but this year is really interesting. We won't even talk about the lawsuit that is hanging over the NFL right now.
Well, we can if you want.
That's a larger topic. Let's not let that overshadow these hires and just talking about the directions of these franchises. Because we got some GM hires to talk about. We got some head coach hires to talk about. Even at the end, our catch-all, it's just the catch-all of all the coordinator changes around the league is very interesting. So much to keep the wheels turning in our head, even though we had the Super Bowl. Mike McDaniel, so I think what stands out to me most here is he's a totally different kind of personality than NFL head coaches, right? We've never seen someone like Mike McDaniel become an NFL head coach. I think CK Parrott, Chris Kaufman said, he seems like he's in a Disney movie where this madcap, zany thing happened. He ended up being the head coach of his favorite franchise, or someone else said it's like one of us became an NFL head coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And Mike has been on that track because he is innovative. I know a lot of people are like, what do you do? Move Deebo Samuel to running back? It's larger than that. You can tell when people talk about Mike McDaniel, Bloom, they don't know much about him. But we're going to learn a lot about him, and you're going to see Miami kind of embrace analytics, embrace being different, and definitely embrace the ground game. What are they, 30th against the run last year?
Right.
Or 30th with the run? They'll move closer to the top 10, maybe not in a year, because remember, they wanted Javonte Williams. They didn't get him because Denver leapfrogged him. So that's a team that will emphasize running back, certainly because of their new head coach.
Yeah. Is this a team now that when Chris Greer's still there, so there's GM continuity here, just not head coach continuity, Brian Flores, again, lawsuit, etc. So what are they going to do about the running back position? Is it something like you said, they wanted Javonte Williams, maybe they would have went after Aaron Jones. Will they invest big at that position? And it's a fresh one. These are in no particular order that we're going to go through the head coach hires, but it's so fresh that we don't really have a lot to talk about yet in terms of his staff. Will he keep any of the old staff? You have to wonder what's going to happen there. But Miami, they say ownership matters, but I think in this case, making this dramatic of a change at head coach, we're going to talk about a few things that it's subtle, but it's a big shift, and a personality, a presence like Mike McDaniel at the head of an organization. It could be great for Tua Tagovailoa. It could be something that makes us forget about the circumstances under which this opening happened so that he could get it.
Well, I think it's great for Tua because they won't lean on Tua.
Yeah.
Like McDaniel's first order of business is fix the ground game. And if you're going to run the hell out of the ball, it means Tua has to do less. It also means defenses will suck up to the line of scrimmage, creating one-on-one opportunities on the outside. So it's good for Tua, but not in a way of like, he'll fill the air with footballs. It's actually the opposite.
Right. And so I'm going to give some credit here to Jordan Rodriguez, who covers the Rams, talking about the McVay and Shanahan coaching trees, right? I mean, this has been an overriding theme of not just this year or last year's cycle. Zach Taylor's in the Super Bowl. The year we joked about Sean McVay's Rolodex. Well, look what it's bore in terms of fruit. Now we're going to have a Super Bowl champion from the McVay-Shanahan tree, if you will. And she put it really precisely when she said, hey, the key thing here is these are coaches who make the game easier for the quarterback. Right? Defenses were getting better and better and better. What do you have to do? You have to make the game easier for the quarterback. And McDaniel can do that for Tua. That could make, again, there's been so much rocky turbulence in this organization, but this marriage of Tua and McDaniel could make us put it all behind them.
There is a trick in the Shanahan tree. I refuse to give McVay the credit, Bloom. In the Shanahan tree, there is a trick. Would you care to guess what it is? What do all these guys have in common? None of them call plays.
Yeah.
So they get the hype. They get kind of groomed without that responsibility of calling plays because the head coach is doing that. Now, the head coach used to be an OC that didn't call plays. who got time and grim. It's almost like a development of a coaching tree by not, again, we're talking about Tua not putting everything on his plate.
Yeah.
That's what Mike Shanahan did it for years. Who was his OC with Denver? Gary Kubiak.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Kubiak, did he call plays or was that Mike Shanahan? Well, it was Mike Shanahan. And then Gary got his chance to do his thing after he learned the ropes. A lot of the times guys are thrown in and they're not exactly familiar with what to do. With the Shanahan tree, you have guys that are ready to take that next step. And I think that's a good thing in hiring in all businesses, Bloom, not just in football. Like, are you getting people that just, check a box? Or are you getting people that are ready for the next step? Usually with the Shanahan tree, those guys are ready.
Yeah, and we'll talk about all this stuff. Really, Cease, this is a show we could probably do 3 or 4 hours on this easily. Because there's also the whole nature of NFL head coach as a job and the interview and how the coaches really do win the teams over in the interview. It's a very compressed experience, but they sit down together and fortunes change, destinies change, and that's why they'll even cease the whole idea of who's ready, right? Matt Eberflus, is he ready, right? Certainly all these coaches, Kevin O'Connell, is he ready? Well, Zach Taylor probably wasn't considered ready. His team's in the Super Bowl, kind of the proof is in the pudding there. So I think our colleague Jason would say maybe we should refrain from saying these are good or bad hires, or it's kind of like grading a draft, but worse because we end up way off. But we can talk about what we know about these guys, and I think in McDaniels' case, if he's ready, he's maybe on the early side of ready. We'll see. I mean, this was the first cycle I think that he was.
The first cycle that it was truly like public,
right?
But behind the scenes, again, we've been talking about him for
they've known about him. Yeah, and there's another side to this too. What does Shanahan in San Francisco look like without McDaniel? Again, so much. Anthony Lynn, by the way, what's the answer? Anthony Lynn. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And I enjoy this because don't get me started on grading a draft. I won't go down that hole, or else we're gonna be here for longer than our scheduled amount of time. We have to go based on what we know.
Yeah,
I've known for years Mike McDaniel is a good coach. Mike McDaniel has the ear of his players. Mike McDaniel thinks about things differently. He's going to do that with Miami Dolphins. So based on what we know, this is a good hire. So, yeah, I'm going to grade it. I'm going to give the Dolphins a positive grade for that. Now we'll see how it works out. And also look at what a guy does without something. Right. Like when we looked at the championship games, right? Mm-hmm. You had 3 things, and then one thing was not like the other. And that one thing was Jimmy Garoppolo. So can you coach when you don't have that guy? Can you get far when you don't have that guy? Because Jimmy G's not that guy. Yeah. Kyle did. Now we'll see what Mike can do using a guy that Tua, we thought he could be the guy. Now he's probably not the guy. But is he good enough to be kind of the guy? I don't know. Lots of guy talk here on the Audible
Footballguys.
Footballguys. Part 2, it's Doug Pederson. In Jacksonville. I like Doug. I can't say that I know him, but I've been around him away from the podium, hang out with him a little bit. I somehow, some way, speaking of Disney movie, they have Forrest Gumped their way into Doug Pederson, right? Like they've just stumbled and bumbled and fumbled, and now they have Doug Pederson. It's actually pretty good based on what it was going to be in Bill O'Brien, based on who it used to be in Urban Meyer. Like Shad Khan, I mean, all due respect to him and Tony, obviously, and the Jaguars organization, but man alive, you could have messed this thing up a million different ways. Somehow they end up with Doug Pederson. Still got Trent Baalke.
Exactly.
And Byron Leftwich, kind of embarrassed that he let that kind of slip a little bit. But, GM coach, the battle, there's a reason why I put this in an article, Bloom. I think I might have talked about it too. There's a reason why the Jets might trade for Russell Wilson. Now, it's a long shot, but just know that there were rumblings on the All-Star road trip about, hey, they might bail on that because you have a battle all the time between front office and coaching staff if they didn't come in together. So look at the Jets and that battle between Robert Saleh can easily blame the front office, but the front office can easily blame Robert Saleh if they get him to the right quarterback and it doesn't work. So you have a battle that's brewing in Jacksonville, but at least you have Doug Pederson there.
Yeah, and see, a few things I'll unpack based on what you said. So when you don't have that GM head coach alignment, like you said, there's finger pointing when things don't go well, and the GM usually wins those battles, right? So this is why this is an unattractive job. Trent Baalke. Why? Sorry, Jags fans. And again, if this works out because they luck into Doug Pederson, we'll forget about the circumstances. But the circumstances right now are they hire Urban Meyer, Trent Baalke brought in GM because of his connections to Meyer, but Meyer's gone. Why is Baalke still there? They say this was kind of strange, Cease, because people who should know were saying Leftwich is the coach. And then he's not the coach. And then he says it's me or Baalke. Well, they didn't choose Byron Leftwich. So, bad organizations are going to do bad things, right? We started off with Miami and Jacksonville. Organizations, ownership matters. And we'll see. Pederson, the immediate thing you think about when this job became open, Cease, is Trevor Lawrence. Who are you going to bring in for Trevor Lawrence? So, yeah.
Who's going to make him look good because he did not look good last year, except for week 17 or week 18 or whatever the hell it is now.
Right. When you put him next to Carson Wentz. So, again, this one's pretty fresh, so there's not a lot yet to talk about in terms of coordinators. Darrell Bevell, by the way, I don't think they're going to keep Darrell Bevell. Maybe they'll keep Darrell Bevell. I don't think so. But he was actually Doug Pederson's position coach back at Green Bay when Pederson was behind Favre. So that's interesting. Connections here. This was not a good spot, Cease. This is like a low-rent spot, right? Like on Monopoly, this is like Baltic Avenue or something. So they got a guy that might do something. And remember, Doug Pederson leaving Philadelphia, also not good vibes. So maybe there'll be some good vibes here. It can't get any worse for Jacksonville.
Yeah, and with the Pederson thing, because I've checked in with enough people around the organization of Philadelphia, just be like, what happened? I know the Carson Wentz thing, because it seemed like Carson or Doug, and then it was both. So it was kind of weird. And we know with Carson Wentz, there's reasons why teammates don't necessarily warm up to Carson Wentz. I won't get into that, Bloom. But with Doug Pederson, I was told that he's incredibly loyal. And the fact that Philadelphia wanted him to change some coaches and he refused to do that, kind of like the Gary Kubiak thing, right?
Yeah.
Gary Kubiak was going to come back to Denver as OC under Vic Fangio. And the Broncos are like, yeah, don't bring, was it Sirianni? I can't remember who it was. But anyway, and Gary was like, no. And, Gary didn't come here. Rich Scangarello did. Either way, that's the Doug Pederson thing. So he's loyal. So they get like a respectable name. They get a Super Bowl champion as a head coach. The Lawrence thing is the biggest puzzle.
And it's a lame duck situation potentially. It's a potentially lame duck situation because of Trent Baalke. I mean, that's the problem, right? It's just if Baalke, this is another organization that could have a full turnover again, right? So it's a bad spot. Pederson can make it a good spot.
Pederson can make it a good spot. Good spot in Houston or no? And Lovie Smith and that luxurious beard. He is a champ, as Chris says in the chat room. Like, yeah, man. Lovie Smith, head coach of the Houston Texans. Okay, Houston. They had, at least it wasn't, Josh McCown?
Well,
right?
For a year.
Seemed to be interested in
until next year.
Until next year, yeah. The third time is a charm when they interview him yet again for the third offseason. But this one is interesting. It is something where all of a sudden it was just Lovey. You know what I mean? And I think the Brian Flores conversation comes into it because you have the NFL being like, you have multiple things coming out after the NFL. We're totally not the way we are, allegedly, or whatever I have to say. That's what Roger Goodell did. Then all of a sudden, Mike McDaniel is multiracial, which is fine. I mean, that's great, and as someone who is multiracial himself as a Chicano, like, that's awesome. That's great for Mike McDaniel. It just seemed the timing of that was like, and guys, he's multiracial. It's like the NFL's trying to cover for the way they are, that they're trying. We have a Rooney rule. Like, yeah, we all know the Rooney rule's bunk because you're not hiring any minority coaches. Well, then Lovey gets hired, and all of a sudden it was Lovey. So again, not going conspiracy theorist here, Bloom, but it was just interesting timing. And Lovey is very, deserving. What's he got? He's got a winning record as a head coach, top of my head. And obviously, like coach of the year back in 2005 or whatever it was with the Bears. So obviously the resume is there with Lovey. The players love Lovey. That's cool. I just don't like the NFL and their policies when it comes to we're totally not what we are.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Cease, because I don't want to make this show about the lawsuit or all the different tangential issues that are tangential to big issues that are tangential to what's going on in our country right now, but to not talk about it in connection to the Houston opening and the Lovey hire. We're not telling the story then. There's just no way. Seems pretty straightforward that this was a reaction to the lawsuit. And like you said, Cease, the league did a 180, right? They already said there's no merit to the claims. Oh, we really want to work to change that thing there's no merit to. So that's a larger conversation, one that we'll come back to. And you hate it for Lovey, because he's a great man who should be respected. And Lovey getting a chance to be a head coach in the NFL should be something that we're celebrating and something that is just accompanied by congratulations for him as, again, a great man, a great coach in the NFL. But it just feels like he's a caretaker until they can hire Josh McCown, give the move a little bit of cover, basically. And it's sad, too, because this is so reminiscent of David Culley, right, Cease? I mean, the David Culley hire is very similar, like the end of this process, a ridiculous process. Again, Cease, someone said Mediterranean Avenue, stay on the Monopoly board. It's the same thing organization-wise, Houston. Like, what are you even looking at if you're taking over the Houston Texans right now? No wonder Josh McCown is this guy that they're zeroed in on, because that's the whole thing is bizarre, continues to be bizarre. So we knock out Miami, Jacksonville, Houston, ownership matters, and then we can move on to the kind of mostly real NFL teams that hired new head coaches.
Mostly real, and we'll get to that as we move on to Denver. And it is the Broncos show, Bloom, and Nathaniel Hackett is here to basically bring in Aaron Rodgers. Mm-hmm. And you have to have a plan, because here's the bottom line. And I get this question all the time. I'll just answer it for you right here. It's going to be Aaron Rodgers if Rodgers wants it to be. He wants to come to Denver, and it's probably going to be with Adams, although that is a little bit more of a, not necessarily pipe dream, but that'll take a little more gymnastics to do. The deal for Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be a couple of first-rounders. That's it. Maybe Jerry Jeudy, and they don't want Drew Lock because nobody does, except for Lock stands. I've never seen a bad quarterback have so many, not like give him a chance type fans, but like he's the guy fans. I don't know. It puts it on for a city. I can't exactly figure out why. There's not a ton of Missouri fans. It'd be different if it was like an Alabama quarterback or something, right? With a huge fan base. But anyway, that being said, Nathaniel Hackett is here in Denver to rejuvenate the offense, because the offense was garbage. Vic Fangio didn't pay attention. In fact, I could ask him the question right now. Hey, Vic, how often did you ignore the offense of the Broncos?
Every day.
Yeah. How often did you skip the meetings for the offense, Vic?
Every day.
How often was your offense just garbage?
Every day.
See, there you go. Straight from the coach. I mean, I'm not saying it. He's saying it. So whatever. It is a Broncos show. Nathaniel Hackett's here. They have to have a plan in case it's not Rodgers, because from what I know, and perhaps I'm revealing too much. Listen, this is up to him. And it's probably going to come down around the 22nd of February, maybe a little bit afterwards. But we're about a month away from knowing where Rodgers is going to play. If Rodgers wants to, and it's not Nashville, okay? If Rodgers wants to play in Denver, he'll play in Denver. Period. Done and done. The hiring of Nathaniel Hackett, Justin Oughton to be the offense coordinator, who won't call plays, by the way. This is a clear sign. This is also a clear sign that's great news for Javonte Williams. This is great news for Pookie, because we remember, Nathaniel Hackett, he can do it with Rodgers. What about without Rodgers? Well, he got Blake Bortles within one pass of going to the Super Bowl. Now, how did he do that? Lots of Leonard Fournette. So this is great news for Javonte Williams. I don't think they need to keep Melvin Gordon. Please, everyone, stop with that. But Nathaniel Hackett is here to fix the Broncos offense. That he will do. Bloom, in my opinion, with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, right? This feels like the lead-in. What is there even to talk about with the Denver hire until we find out what Rodgers is going to do? That's going to define it, really. And then otherwise, we'll see. I mean, if it's not Rodgers, well, that's the challenge, right? Nathaniel Hackett. It changes for Hackett the way we look at him as a hire. I mean, it makes his job more challenging. Sometimes the themes are overly simplistic. Cease. We don't want to talk about QB wins, but we do have a quarterback, like we talked about with McVay and Shanahan. Well, maybe you can get to the Super Bowl even if you don't have a quarterback. That's why the McVay-Shanahan trees are so hot right now. This team did win with the corpse of Peyton Manning. They won a Super Bowl, but I don't think this defense is going to be anywhere near that level. It has to be offense. So to be continued, let's say, on the Denver hire.
Have you heard Nathaniel Hackett? He sounds exactly like Will Ferrell. Exactly.
Well, we got to get him on the show, Cease.
Exactly. My producer, Dale, worked at McDonald's in high school with Nathaniel Hackett. And Hackett was a senior when Dale was a freshman. And like one day, Nathaniel left his dad's keys to his Viper, or he let Nathaniel drive his Viper to McDonald's. Because of course Nathaniel Hackett was a senior in high school, which means he was a manager at McDonald's, and he drove a Viper to McDonald's because his dad is Paul Hackett. He left his keys or something, and then Dale had to take Nathaniel the keys to the Viper. I was like, why didn't you just take the Viper? That's what I would have done, and probably wrecked it and put it in the ditch, and then, had to give him the keys. But either way. So, yes. Look it up. We're going to run the ball. Here's the ball. Yes.
Right.
Look it up.
6 degrees of Cecil Lammey.
Sounds exactly like Will Ferrell. Sounds exactly like former Broncos head coach Josh McDaniels, now with Vegas. And they got Tom McMahon as well in Vegas, which means their special teams is going to suck. And I think McMahon and McDaniels go back, that's fine. But Tom McMahon is not a good special teams coach whatsoever. The Vegas Raiders, I wrote about this in my Mile High Monday, Bloom. I know you read it every single week at denverfan.com. I said they got the wrong coach and they got the right coach, because they got the wrong coach in Josh McDaniels, they got the right coach in Patrick Graham, their DC, was the lone bright spot for the Giants last year. And the Giants didn't want to let him go, but they decided to let him explore other avenues. He's now going to Las Vegas. So they got the right coach in Graham, the wrong coach in McDaniels. And Josh, when he was here, he changed so many things from Mike Shanahan. And I could go on and on and on about what he changed, but just know this. He was such a jerk to everyone. He would yell at everyone in front of everyone, didn't care. Secretaries, other coaches. I heard him go bilingual to the landscapers. Okay. Like if you're using another language to be in aloha, and I have to clean it up for YouTube and for Joe, sorry, Joe. But if you have to use another language just because you're aloha, that shows the special type of aloha you are. And that's Josh McDaniels. Now, has he learned? Has he grown? Sure. I talked to him at the Super Bowl a few years ago. And it seems like he was obviously mature. Bloom, we're all different when we get older, right? But Vegas, what are you doing, man? What are you doing, Hans? What are you doing?
I guess maybe I should have grouped this with the Houston, Jacksonville, Miami ownership matters, right, Cease? And really, ownership matters. We're going to get to the Giants next. Ownership matters. Wow.
Well, Mark Davis is broke. I don't know. It's not a secret, but like that team, he can't do anything. This was
cash
a joke.
poor.
This was a joke that I heard on the All-Star road trip. Mark Davis can't do anything without asking the bankers first.
Yeah. Well, that's America, baby. So there's a lot of layers here, Cease. I mean, first of all, just real quick. Did you see this coming? Did anyone see this coming? This kind of came out of the blue, right? McDaniels, well, he was going to succeed Belichick when he didn't take the Colts job, right? And the Raiders job, that's the job. Like the idea being you're sitting back waiting for your spot. That's your spot. There's alignment with Dave Ziegler, former Broncos scout. He started out as a Broncos scout.
Yeah.
Now the GM there, and he replaced Nick Caserio before getting this job. And like you said, Patrick Graham, and that's the right coach. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But there's another story here, Cease, that's also out in the open, by the way. I can't wait for someone like, hey, Cecil Lammey said you were an Aloha. What's an Aloha? No, wait for Broncos Raiders week for that, Cease. But Rich Bisaccia and the coaches were mad. They were not happy. I think Vic Tafer put it that they thought that if John Gruden had gone to 10-7 and gone to the playoffs and lost, they would have retained the staff.
Mm-hmm.
They were mad. Maybe they should be.
Yeah.
Maybe they overthought this. They said, considering how the team started out the season, why wouldn't that staff get another chance? So they're leaving bad vibes behind them making this move for Josh McDaniels. Who, like you said, Cease, the second time around, Bill Belichick, again, thinking of him. Did you learn anything from your first failure? And again, it's 6 degrees of Cecil Lammey, all these connections to Cecil Lammey. And I don't know. I mean, it's the Raiders. It's sad in a way because it felt like the team had really generated, after everything they've been through, some positive momentum. Now you make this turn into Patriots, another remaking of the Patriots, which, I mean, the Titans kind of were one of those. There was Patriots overtones to the Falcons, which peaked 28-3. But it kind of feels like that's yesterday's flavor, right, Cease?
Right.
So, yeah.
I don't like the word retread, Bloom, because on our semis, when we would haul hay, you always had to watch out for the retread, right? You didn't want retreads, but if you were poor, you had retread for your tires. But you always had to watch out for them. And you didn't put them in the important spots on your semi-trailer. Hot Peterbilt talk here on the Audible. But it's usually the second time around when guys get it. Yeah. Not always, but it's usually the second time around. And you mentioned Belichick, Pete Carroll, second time around, Mike Shanahan, second time around. Like, yeah, second time around coaches, don't call them retreads.
And Cease, let me interject here to say, bring it back to the Flores lawsuit and say, that's why we shouldn't necessarily look at how many minority coaches get hired, but how many get a second chance.
No, you don't.
You don't.
You don't. And that, is there a Rooney rule for the after Rooney rule? Like, seriously, the NFL has a problem that they won't admit to, but then they admit to it. Yeah. So it's weird. Hey, everybody, football. Hey, everybody, the Giants. We're sticking with Daniel Jones. And I have checked in with multiple people that I trust, and they are sticking with Daniel Jones. And I don't care if it's at the Shrine Bowl. I don't care if it's at the Senior Bowl. I checked in with people. I was like, you sure? Are you sure? As I knock around my microphone, are you sure? Sound like Sam Kinison there. About the only Sam Kinison quote I can use. Are you sure? Is because, well, you've got Brian Daboll, right? If there was ever a time with 2 top 10 picks that you could say, let's take Malik Willis, right?
Right.
Let's put it out there. You've got Joe Schoen. You've got Mike Kafka, who worked with Pat Mahomes. So you have all of these, great minds coming together, and it's like, nope. We're going to keep Daniel Jones for one more year. Well, who are they going to draft next year, Bloom? Because that's all I got to say with this Giants situation.
And, of course, again, the elephant in the room, this process of hiring Bill Belichick's text. And, again, see, 2022, covering the NFL in 2022, talking about it, text, a missent text. We had Odell Beckham family, like Odell's teammates liking things he was posting. It's interesting. It's interesting seeing this stuff play out in a very public way. Maybe that wasn't meant to be public. You get Brian Daboll, though. We've talked about this. And, hey, if we see what Josh Allen did, Brian Daboll, whatever part of that he was, and certainly Daniel Jones, he's not quite on the Josh Allen level, Cease, but he is certainly similar to Josh Allen as a prospect in the sense that the old school scouting, he's big, he's rugged, he's got an arm, he looks like a quarterback. He's got those tools to work with. The game just needs to be simplified for him. You just need to set him up so that he doesn't fall into his traps of having no pocket presence or sense of a clock in the pocket. But you can do it. You go back to those Kubiak offenses, right? Jake Plummer, Brian Greasy. You just don't let the quarterback make decisions. You control the quarterback with a joystick, basically. It might work. We'll see. Like you said, they lose Patrick Graham. So let's do the other side of the Patrick Graham story here, Cease. Because Patrick Graham, he's interviewing, I think, wasn't he candidate, in Minnesota, right? He was a candidate in Miami, right? I think, wasn't he an in-house candidate for the Giants, too? Wasn't he an in-house candidate for the Giants?
Yeah.
And Graham and Flores are tight. Tight. So when Flores goes public and says the Giants had their mind made up when they were having me in for an interview, how do you stay without organization? I think that's what happened. I mean, I'm speculating, all right? I have no knowledge. But it sure seems to me like after everything that went down, that there's just no way. I know CC phrased it like the Giants let him explore their options. I mean, I think he just wanted out. And now, we'll see. Right now, they're down to Wink Martindale, Steve Wilkes, and Jim Schwartz. So we'll see. The defense was not what was wrong with that team. The defense was what was right with the Giants, or what outperformed expectations. So that's a blow. And, we'll see about Brian Dable. We'll see about Daniel Jones. You have to think, though, Cease, even with them sticking with Jones for a year, this new, and at least you have alignment between head coach and GM. That's good coming out, just like they learned in Buffalo with Bean and McDermott. So that's something. That's some place to start. But like you said, who's the quarterback that's really going to be the quarterback they're judged by? Because they better hope it ain't Daniel Jones.
You got to tie them together somehow, some way, which leads us to Chicago. And it's like, well, how does that work? How does that work with Justin Fields? And again, you feel sorry for some of these young passers because their teams, how do they not recognize this? Hey, they have to tie together. You have to, if you made that commitment to a first round quarterback, you have to either scrap it and go with another one like Arizona did with Kyler Murray. What the hell, Kyler?
Yeah. Speaking of social media drama.
Going to Tampa Bay. You heard it here last. Well, Chicago, it's like, okay, what does this do for Justin Fields? Chicago?
I don't know. Matt Eberflus, very interesting. Speaking of Josh McDaniels, he was the defensive coordinator that was going to be under McDaniels in Indy, and then McDaniels left Indy at the altar and hired Reich. They kept Eberflus, and that worked out, obviously. It's been a bit of an overachieving defense, let's say. By the way, submitted without comment, the Bears have gone from Ryan and Matt to Ryan and Matt. Anyway, Eberflus is going to be, from what I've learned, Cease, a raw guy. Maybe Dan Campbell before the Sean Payton experience. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, Eberflus has done some good things with his defense, but most of the great praise about him is as a leader. And that's fine. I get it, Bears way and so on. They're going to switch to a 4-3 defense. He's not going to call the plays on defense. Alan Williams coming over with him, Colts defensive back coach. Actually played with Mike Tomlin, William and Mary. But like you said, it's really about Justin Fields. It's all about Justin Fields. The Ryan, of course, by the way, in this case, Ryan Poles from the Kansas City system. The Bears actually signed him as an undrafted free agent. Now he's their GM. But you get to the Fields, and who's the guy? Luke Getsy, Cease. Luke Getsy. So and there was some talk maybe he might go with Hackett, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he, by the way, Getsy interviewed for the Broncos head coaching position, as well as being an option for their OC when they hired Hackett.
So there you go. I mean, that's the answer for Fields. I mean, that's really from our fantasy lens. That's the most important hire here. But the Bears turn it over, and it's a little bit odd when it's out of sync like this, where it's the quarterback. That's why it felt so odd when they traded up for him. And as you can see, you can't buy yourself more time. Getting a quarterback, Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, it didn't buy you more time. You were out. Should have been out a year before, and then you wouldn't have this lack of alignment. But you have to think that Luke Getsy was hired, at least in part, because of what they hope he can do with Justin Fields. And then in this division in flux, because if Aaron Rodgers is on the way out, whether it be to host Jeopardy or have a podcast that millions of people listen to or run for office or be the Broncos quarterback, we'll see about Kirk Cousins. We're going to talk about Cousins and O'Connell. Now you have this Chicago situation, and then Detroit. Maybe it's Detroit, man. Maybe it's Detroit coming up on the outside, coming up, slowly but surely, because we're seeing some divisions, NFC South, NFC North, maybe thrown into disarray.
What was the meme floating around like with Eminem at halftime and Matthew Stafford playing? This is as close as Detroit's going to get to a Super Bowl.
Well, Detroit got Jerome Bettis, the bus, and his Super Bowl ring, so they got that.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. Super Bowl 40, terrible game. I guess you got some news in New Orleans, Bloom, right?
Yeah,
you got some news to go over. Is it exciting? Yeah. How are New Orleanians? New Orleanians? Who dats? How the who dats responding to Dennis Allen?
Okay. Well, it's continuity, Cease. I mean, this is the most boring head coach hire of all, by far. And this is more 6 degrees Cecil Lammey, because you covered Dennis Allen.
Yeah.
You can speak to Dennis Allen, the man. You can speak to Dennis Allen on the Aloha scale or something like that with Josh McDaniels.
Very low on
that
scale.
Right? I mean, this has been a defense-forward team. It just hasn't been acknowledged. Even in the latter Drew Brees years, this was a defense-forward team. Cam Jordan, right? I mean, this is a defense team. This is a team that maybe could have made some noise with the better quarterback play in each of the last 2 years because of their defense. When their defense is on, Dennis Allen, leader of that defense. Pete Carmichael, I imagine he's going to... I have to think you're going to really see this team of the teams with all these head coaching changes. It's almost total continuity, honestly, because everybody in the building knows Dennis Allen. You know what he's all about. It's about the quarterback. Again, quarterback wins is not a real stat, except it's about the quarterback. It's about the quarterback they can get. And there's not that much more to say here.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. See, something like the most interesting thing you can add is like Dennis Allen, talk about Dennis Allen, because this is...
Well, they're in salary cap hell.
Right.
They don't have a quarterback. I'm like, who are you going to hire in 2 more years?
Exactly.
Dennis Allen will get 2 years and then they'll can him. He may not even get 2 full seasons.
Right.
They're in a terrible, terrible situation.
Yeah. So it's not, I mean, that's, I think, why you're just going with continuity here. You're not doing any big change of direction. Honestly, Cease, I think that you also may have a situation here where the franchise is kind of just in shock right now. I'd imagine you're going to have the same thing when Mike Tomlin is no longer the Steelers head coach, whenever that comes to pass, where you have a blueprint and you have just a vibe in the building for so long, and they're not going to change it up too greatly.
A vibe in the building in Minnesota is different now with Kevin O'Connell.
Totally different.
After the Super Bowl, being hired as their head coach, and O'Connell, a player that we saw get ready to drink at the Shrine game. Mm-hmm. You and I scouted him coming out of San Diego State. O'Connell, known as energetic, creative. I think this is a great move. Now they're stuck with Kirk Cousins. They're stuck with Kirk Cousins for multiple reasons. One, he's got a $45 million cap hit with $45 million in dead money. They're stuck with him. Now, I have checked with people around the league because the reports, who had the report? It's that Jeremy Fowler. And good guy, good reporter, sound reporting. He'd reported that, hey, Kevin O'Connell, he came in with a plan for Kirk Cousins. He was excited to work with Kirk Cousins. And then the report also said, and other candidates were too. Well, let's just say that might not be entirely accurate in terms of them being excited to work for Kirk Cousins. Teammates, it's weird with Kirk Cousins because Kirk Cousins is kind of weird anyway. There's some teammates and former teammates that I know. Hell, Tyler Columbus is like his best friend. So I know there's some former teammates and current teammates that like love him. But there's some teammates that take issue with him. And, it's not fantasy football. He can put up some numbers and he can win one big game or whatever Cousins fans always point to. But is he that guy to get you over the top? No, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. So with Kevin O'Connell, great. He's excited to work with Kirk Cousins. He's got a plan for Kirk Cousins. And I'm sure he has a plan for after Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I think so too. And this one, see, we all knew Mike Zimmer was going to be out. We didn't know for sure that Rick Spielman was going to be out, but he was. And well, this is a big change, and this is a potentially big change along the same lines as Mike McDaniel, where it's like this is somebody who the GM I'm talking about now. Like, we haven't seen somebody like Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah become an NFL GM. I mean, this is the pendulum is now swung all the way to the analytics side. He was an analytics guy. I think he was going to work in finance or something like that.
Yes.
And then he was an analytics guy mainly with San Francisco, right? I mean, that was it for like 8 years. And then Cleveland brought him on, and he learned the NFL operations side last year. Last year. So the word is that they're going to keep the scouting staff. They're going to keep the player personnel types because they feel like the football people are going to do the football things. And he's going to be the GM as a kind of a, I don't really know. This is a new model. And also
a new way to look at things, but this is the reaction that you get when you go from Spielman and Zimmer, right? Who put together solid teams. They just always swung and missed on quarterbacks. They swung and missed on all the and Teddy, they only missed because Teddy got hurt.
Yeah.
Teddy's story would be different if his leg didn't collapse on itself.
Right. And with Zimmer, and we can talk about this on the head coach. So that's a fascinating thing to just put aside. That as an organizational chart goes, there's no other team that looks like this. I don't think there is. Is there a place where the buck stops when you have an organization like this, where the GM isn't really like truly in charge of everything, or didn't get to pick his own personnel guys and put together his own scouting department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you bring in Kevin O'Connell. So go ahead. You want to say something on that?
No. I'm just moving my mic.
Yeah. So, and then you have Zimmer, and isn't this Cease just kind of like cleaning out the house, and really in the terms of like scrubbing everything down, repainting the walls, new colors? Like, really, I think they want to get the feeling of Mike Zimmer out of the building.
What it's like is when someone goes to a new relationship is like, my ex-girlfriend didn't like that I had tattoos. I'm getting more tattoos.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. Because I think everyone was just tired of the Zimmer style, and it took them to a certain point. Now with Spielman, like you said, it might have to do with quarterbacks, might have to do with just he was really over aggressive at times about playing the draft. Sometimes did some really brilliant things. But you have O'Connell, and like you said, Cece, the immediate connection is Cousins. O'Connell and Cousins were together for a year in Washington. O'Connell coming from the McVay tree now, one of those guys that is supposed to make the game easier for the quarterback. But it's a 1-year proposition. And we'll see. Jordan Rodriguez, again, talking about on The Athletic, always doing excellent work, that O'Connell, she said he evened out the temperature in the room with McVay. And you know which side of that McVay is, right? That McVay was excitable. Like my wife says, he needs a friend or a hobby, something, something other than football. And then you have O'Connell, and it said he was really approachable. He was really friendly. He got along with everybody. And the players would come to him because they knew he was friendly. And it's real interesting to read these specific word choices with the background of, again, he balanced out the temperature, So there's inferences you can make about McVay if O'Connell is what McVay isn't, and this is what O'Connell is, right? Approachable, friendly, And the players said he also had the answers to the questions that they would come to him with. So it sounds like, he's a peacemaker, not a dictator. And we'll see, Minnesota. This one is curious. It's bold as McDaniel, or maybe more. You should be
excited, but more excited when Kirk Cousins isn't.
Yeah, isn't that really what it's all about? Again, quarterback wins isn't a stat, but we won't really know how they did until they get a different quarterback.
Yeah, so be excited for the peacemaker, Bloom. I like that, right? We need more of that.
Yeah. All we are saying is give Eric Bieniemy a chance.
Oh boy. And the chat room was talking about EB like
he doesn't have a contract right now.
I know. I know, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
You can't speak on it. But just know there are things that could be.
Lester asked me a question in the chat room. I'm like, I'm not going to talk about that publicly. You kidding me?
You can't.
Get me privately with a couple cold pops, and I might have a different story. But like, no, I'm not going to talk about that. Like, no. But anyway, so here we go, Bloom, in the other category.
Yeah. And I want you to react to some stuff. I'll drive here.
You drive and I'll react because there's a lot.
There's a lot. And these are all things we'll continue to talk about and flesh out as the offseason goes on, okay? First and foremost, let's talk about who didn't get hired. Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh went back into the NFL pool and didn't get scooped up. What was that about?
He's probably a lot of the times with coaches and the egos and the massaging that is necessary for said egos. No, Bob Kraft, I'm not talking about that. You just want how much you love me. How much you love me. And then when you see these other deals and you see USC throwing around a bunch of money, you see all these other deals in college football, you're like, well, they love him a lot more than they love me.
Yeah.
What if the NFL loved me? Oh, Michigan, I love you still.
Maybe.
That's what I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, he took a pay cut last year. But there was also talk, rumors that Minnesota, everybody thought it was done. And maybe the way he came into the interview, it wasn't done. And there was talk that he was going to go to the Raiders. His name floated around a lot. And it seemed like he was actually available in the sense that, you don't set up an interview just to... I don't think
it's like when the NFL used to use LA as a reason to get a new stadium, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna move to LA. You better get a new stadium, or we're gonna move to LA. Like that's how Harbaugh was. Like we'll just hire Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, Buffalo. Now they do get to keep Ken Dorsey. Big win. He's going to replace Brian Dable. You have the continuity there. Bobby Johnson, who was overseeing their offensive line rebuild, it went really well. He went to the Giants. Also, they bring in Joe Brady as quarterback coach. Josh Allen, you lucky dog. What a pickup. What a pickup for Josh Allen. What a pickup for Buffalo. They're a good organization, Cease. They're a good organization. They lose a lot of coaches, and we're not even worried about them. Mm-hmm. New England, new offensive coordinator, still not decided yet, right? It might be Bill O'Brien, or at least Bill O'Brien's considered the name that is most commonly connected to it. And, there's some movement there, but Adam Gase's name comes up. Anything there on who's going to replace McDaniels in New England?
I don't know. No idea.
Yeah, nothing. It doesn't matter. It's Mac Jones.
Right.
Quarterbacks. Indy, they're going to bring in Gus Bradley. They lost a lot of the defensive staff. I think they've got a good match for his scheme. Baltimore brings in Mike McDonald, the youngest defensive coordinator in the league at 34. Michigan. He oversaw Michigan's defense getting rebuilt, and they slayed Ohio State. So he went and helped Jim Harbaugh, who we just talked about, slay Ohio State, maybe get a big raise or something. And now he goes back with Baltimore, where he was a defensive assistant for like 6 or 7 years, gets to be the defensive coordinator. It's a great story. They're excited. They're super excited about this. This is like his dream job. They keep Greg Roman. They did lose Bobby Ingram to Wisconsin to be the offensive coordinator. Big Ten football. Pittsburgh. See, still no offensive line coach and no assistant offensive line coach. Okay.
Mike Munchak's available, right?
Yeah, right. Okay. Terrell Austin promoted to take the place of Keith Butler. Doesn't matter. See, that's the talk around Pittsburgh ways. Does it even matter? Mike Tomlin calls the plays anyway. Doesn't matter who the defensive coordinator is. I think Aditi Kinkabwala said something to the effect of Butler wasn't even involved in the designing of the defense. Okay. Dallas gets to keep everybody. I just want to note that. That was probably something, Cecil, if you could have bet on that neither Dallas coordinator would get hired away, you could have got some good odds on that. And that's what comes to pass with Mike McCarthy.
Get some skin in the game.
Yeah. Detroit, they lost they fired Anthony Lynn, basically. Ben Johnson, this one's interesting. He's basically Dan Campbell's protege. And the players love him. Amon Ross St. Brown said, all the production I had at the end of the year, that's Ben Johnson. Apparently, when Campbell took over play calling from Anthony Lynn, Ben Johnson took over a much larger role in designing the offense. The players love him. He's a tight ends coach, but they say he's innovative. And Amon-Ra St. Brown said he listens to the players. He listens to the play. What a concept, Cease.
Right.
He listens to the players. I love what Dan Campbell's doing in Detroit. They also, by the way, may lose Aubrey Pleasant, a rising star, to Minnesota to be their defensive coordinator. Aaron Glenn, who interviewed in New Orleans. Did he interview in Denver too?
Yes. The first place he interviewed was Denver.
Yeah. So he's going to be a head coach soon. And I think Pleasant was supposed to be the next guy to be their defensive coordinator. But look, Dan Campbell already kind of has a little bit of a coaching tree going here. So you like what Detroit is doing. Green Bay, Adam Stenavich, the run game, offensive line guy gets promoted. And they also got Rich Bisaccia. So good on them.
Great because their special teams sucked.
Well, yeah.
The 49ers game.
Yeah.
Because didn't they burn through 2 special teams coaches last year?
Yes.
Yeah, so Bisaccia is great.
Godsend. A
Great
godsend.
for Green Bay.
Yeah.
Too bad they'll have Jordan Love or Drew Lock starting.
Matt Ryan.
Not Drew Lock. They don't want Drew Lock.
Carolina. Ben McAdoo ceased. What was he even doing the last few years? Like managing a Home Depot or something? He wasn't even around football, I think. I mean, he didn't have an official job in the NFL. I think last year he was like a consultant somewhere for Dallas maybe or something. So he's the offensive coordinator now. You go from Joe Brady to McAdoo. And again, all the buzz around that one is nobody wanted that job. Matt Rule's not going to be around for much longer anyway.
Well, what have you been saying all show? Ownership matters.
Ownership matters. Yeah. We'll talk about the Rams and who they replace O'Connell with, probably someone in-house. San Francisco, again, losing Mike McDaniel, the big hire, Anthony Lynn. Anthony Lynn's not the offensive coordinator.
By the way, the Rams might promote, there's a couple of people. Thomas Brown. Remember Thomas Brown?
Yeah.
He got head coaching interest, by the way.
Uh-huh.
So Thomas Brown's probably the front runner, but the other, and this is a very close connection with Cecil Lammey, the other is Zach Robinson.
Wow.
Who not only was a Patriots
Chatfield Chargers.
And he's a Chatfield Charger, and he was my son's quarterback coach.
Yeah.
And he worked for PFF for 3 years. Him and somebody else. Anyway, so Zach Robinson is in. If you want to be ahead of the game, you want to learn like the Mike McDaniel 3 years before everyone knows Mike McDaniel. Just watch Zach Robinson.
Yeah, Zach Robinson. One last note too, because it's Seattle. Yawn. I mean, they just promote Clint Hurt to defensive coordinator. It's Ed Donatel comes on, I think, there also to work with him. More of the same. I mean, Seattle's just destined to be more of the same, more of the same. This circles back to your Russell Wilson rumor, Cease. You know, more of the same, more of the same. Maybe Russell Wilson will get out sooner or later to try something else somewhere else. But for now, Seattle, more of the same. At the end of the show, filled with change.
Change is what we've got in the National Football League, and what we have for you coming up on Thursday is our Super Bowl preview. Yes, that's right. Join us Thursday at noon Eastern time. We'll break it down all for you right here on our YouTube channel. Of course, tonight we've got our Dynasty show, Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara coming through, getting it done at the highest level. So that's our Dynasty show coming up. And then, of course, more news and notes, more anything that goes on in the NFL. Of course, free agency, the window for franchise tag players is coming up on the 22nd. So we got, it just doesn't stop.
No.
And we are here for you. So, and I learned this thing about YouTube, Bloom. It's very important that I say this because the algorithm is very mysterious. It actually helps if you watch the video to the end. So don't bail on us and don't click away. And I can tell when you did. It helps the algorithm if you watch the video through its entirety. So I will keep it brief and I'll say thanks for checking us out. Thanks for following along on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom, at Cecil Lammey, at the Audible. Do all those YouTube things. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Stay all the way to the end because he's Sigmund Bloom. He loves you. I'm Cecil Lammey, and I like you a lot. I love you too. Anyway, we appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned. And as always, I command you stay frosty.